are fashionable Chiori's biggest pros and cons. That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. You've all seen the title and thumbnail. However, as always with these types of videos, I will start by discussing all of Chiori's pros before talking about her cons. I'm gonna tear into her pretty badly in the latter half of this video, so I'm gonna take the time now to say that I do like Chiori as a character, and I have played her extensively. I just cannot recommend her in good faith if you care about pull value, but we will get onto that later on. For now, we're starting with pros, with one of those being her excellent synergy with Arataki Itto. Those teams tend to have a lot of geo constructs, which this fashion designer absolutely cannot get enough of. Whether they come from Zhongli, Itto's Ushi, or some other construct generator, there will always be at least one present for Chiori to take advantage of, which is all she needs in order to do her magic. So her synergy with Itto teams is already very natural, because she really enjoys the teammates within them. Even if you opt to use Bennett in your mono Geo team, the cutting edge of fashion still enjoys that, because she's dual scaling, meaning that she adores both def and attack buffs alike, highly befitting of our dual-wielding seamstress. The main thing that she offers to Itto teams is a whole lot of extra damage. She single-handedly raised the overall damage profile of the Goofy Beetleman's teams, effectively replacing Albedo as one of his best 5-star slots. Her whole kit is also a lot more conducive to this team compared to Albedo too. What I mean by this is that the Chalk Prince had some weird things going against him in mono Geo, such as providing a chunky albeit useless EM buff and having a burst that scales on attack, therefore not benefiting from Goro's presence much. She is perfectly suited to this particular team, and the damage she provides here is absolutely superb. Another neat thing about Chiori is that she is able to be played as an on-field Geo DPS. This means that if you're somebody that really likes the character, you're able to deploy her as your main without having to worry about constellations. I said this in a previous video, but to briefly recap, I really appreciate when this is an option at C0. It doesn't lock free-to-play players or low spenders out of playing their favorite unit as a main DPS. Whereas in my case, in order to be a proper Farina main, I had to go all the way to C6. There's also a considerable fun factor to be acknowledged here too. If you get bored of playing Chiori traditionally as a Geo support, then you're easily able to switch playstyles to shake things up a little. You get a larger package on the whole, which equals more fun in the long term. Definitely a plus no matter what way you look at it. As for her quality as a DPS, you can play her with a 4-piece Intercity Kachina as her drill counts as a construct, then have the likes of Farina and a C0 to 5 Bennett buff her, essentially the structure of a Navia team. She'll play as well as Itto before Chiori got added to his teams, so not very good, but it's still a viable abyss clearing option. Also, Kachina's C4 can buff the fashion designer, which is pretty nice. However, something that I find really annoying is that C6 Bennett cannot be used with DPS Chiori. She is literally one of the only DPS characters who gets their elemental application overridden by Bennett C6, which I don't know about you, but considering that almost no other character has this problem, it's pretty annoying to me. Either way, you can also play mono Geo DPS Chiori, or omit Farina for somebody else like Xilonen, who doesn't force you to use a healer. While it's certainly not the most optimal way to play this character, it's certainly a silly option for you to play around with. One other neat aspect when it comes to Chiori is her powerful double Geo Core. This core actually got an upgrade recently with the release of 4-piece Intercity Kachina, providing both her other teammates plus Chiori a 40% damage bonus. It's actually a really decent core that you can flexibly slap onto the end of any team, which doesn't get ruined by Geo application. They're a powerful slot in if you're unsure who else to put at the end of your teams. It's also revered as a highly comfortable team thanks to all the crystallized shards. Yet, that's not all when it comes to comfort, because this core traditionally used Zhongli, and it can still do so to great effect. 4-piece Archaic Petra Rex Lapis, anyone? Zhongli is really comfy to use anywhere, as we all know. Since Chiori likes Geo constructs, pairing up with this guy makes for quite the solid duo. The main reason that this pair of duos doesn't get much attention is because other duos are simply stronger, while fitting into the same amount of scenarios to greater effect, such as the infamous Bennett plus Xiangling double Pyro Core, or the oh-so-mighty double Hydro Core of Farina and Xilonen, or Xingqiu if you're more partial to using him. Even so, this core is very nice for anybody with severe skill issue that wants something strong yet additionally brainless to play. Good stuff. Right, here begins the point of the video in which I absolutely tear this character apart. I will reiterate, I do like this character, yet I will still remain brutally honest for the sake of your Primo Gems. Chiori has no pull value. Yes, it is as simple as that. This is for the main reason of being extremely replaceable. Working with Itto really isn't that big of a deal. He isn't a great DPS, or he at least isn't anywhere near the top tier Genshin damage dealers, so that use case really isn't anything to write home about. She truly is torn to threads. Sorry. Anyways, then when it comes to all of Chiori's other use cases, worthless, because a permanently free C0 4-star at level 20 will offer more to every team that the cutting edge of fashion works in, all because Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City exists. This allows Kachina to offer a massive damage bonus % buff to all of her teammates, and because she's a not-long character, she can trigger the full set effect. What Kachina provides through only this set, because her own kit really isn't anything to write home about, is infinitely more valuable to all the teams they both work in compared to the damage of a C0R1 Chiori. I said C0R1, as in a freaking free C0 4-star is more valuable than a limited 5-star with their limited time weapon. This is especially damning for Chiori with Navia. They always had an anti-synergy as there's no constructs, at least typically speaking, in Navia teams, so she could never fully take advantage of her full kit, severely gimping her damage. The moment that the Spina's leader got an actual buffer with Cinder City Kachina, she ditched the Seamstress. Now with Xilonen coming up, oh boy, yeah, it's so over for Chiori. She needs C1R1 to beat Cinder Kachina. Throw the cat's red shred on top of that big buff, then the gap gets even larger. You still could have made an argument for Chiori Navia in the past thanks to Constellations, but thanks to Xilonen coming out literally right next to this character's rerun, yeah, it's over for all of this unit's potential use cases. It doesn't help that Xilonen can also be an on-field Geo DPS, and will most likely be a better on-field DPS than Chiori. She got cooked by a free 4-star, and if you look at Constellations, then she will proceed to be cooked by a C0 5-star instead. There is nowhere to use Chiori after Xilonen comes out, aside from Itto teams. A lot of emphasis on how cheap alternatives are better than her, huh? Yeah, well, the fact that she's whale bait makes this all even worse. The gap between C0R0 to C0R1 to C1R1 is absolutely gargantuan. Her C1 solves the issue of her being locked to construct-based teams, yet this doesn't suddenly make Chiori offer buffing, it simply resolves the issue of her lack of flexibility. With Xilonen coming out, this C1 has lost so much value as well, because you'd rather always use a C0 cat over her. With C0, yeah, don't even bother trying to use her outside of construct-based teams. Kachina or Xilonen will literally always be better. If your problem is that you don't want the cat, no problem, because the drill kit is free. Everyone has access to a unit that is better than Chiori right from the get-go. Also, her R1 is such a comical damage increase over all her other 5-star weapon options. It's ridiculous how much weaker she is without her main dedicated weapon. With that being said, in fairness, Notlan did introduce a much needed craftable sword option for her. Thank goodness, because this unit is already inaccessible enough as she is. She feels abysmal to play in non-construct teams at C0R0 while needing Constellations just to feel okay in teams without them. You might be wondering why I'm not framing this as a pro, because I usually view valuable Primogem-based investment as a net positive for a character. My issue of Chiori in particular is that these cons are not improving upon a kit which already feels great and fulfilling. It's fixing an artificial issue that did not have to be there in the first place, much like Hu Tao C1. Selling the solution. But at least of Tao, you're paying for upgrades for a good character. You aren't getting that same value with the Geo woman. Having to get Constellations in order for a character to feel borderline playable is just rough, man. I think that most of us can agree that such a concept is textbook whale bait. That's another major con of Chiori. This construct nonsense makes her incredibly restrictive. I won't dwell on this for too long since I've already sprinkled my grievances with this fact throughout this video, but to focus on it a little more, might I draw your attention to Kachina and Zhongli. The drill kit is able to very comfortably act as a budget Kazuha and Xilonen replacement in teams, acting as a really cheap 4-piece intercity holder on the end of many different comps. She also doesn't cost any resources. You can simply leave the set on her at +0 while not leveling her and call it a day, because the kit is only here to proc the set. There are no drawbacks to using her in whatever comp you desire. To specify, this means that her main role in the team is not going to be inhibited by any weird drawbacks. The same applies to Zhongli. The Geo Archon can comfortably flex anywhere he wants, as his universal res shred plus excellent protection is something that most teams can greatly enjoy. His ability to hold Archaic Petra makes him nice in teams where you're guaranteed to always get the crystallized shard you want, such as Nervalette teams, because the wearer of Petra has to pick up the shard in order to proc the 4-piece set effect. Otherwise, if that's too much hassle, you can opt for something like Tenacity to get the job done. He will have zero problems fitting into your desired teams. Chiori, on the other hand, Her performance is severely damaged if she has no construct users on her team to help her generate more dolls. A core functionality of her is being actively inhibited by the fact that there is nobody like this, which massively face tanks her performance with characters such as Navia. This nonsensical restrictiveness makes her feel terrible to play in any non-Itto team. Until we get more construct-based DPSs, this will unfortunately remain as the case. Also, the biggest nonsense in the world is that she can't utilize Goro. Chiori can't snapshot, so this means that the moment she goes off field, the dog boy's buffs aren't helping her anymore. Isn't that nice? One brief final con that I'd like to mention is that Chiori's weapon is legit better than the character herself. I suppose you can consider this as a pro, because technically it means that the weapon is good, but I view it as a con because it's pretty sad to have your weapon be more worth risking a 50-50 over rather than yourself. Thanks to offfielders like Kachina and Xilonen, the second half of the passive, which needs geo damage to be triggered, will be much easier to proc on most characters. The crit stick is really large, and the full passive makes this a fantastic pick for any skill or normal attack based sword user. For example, Farina, Alhaitham, or even DPS Xilonen, funnily enough. So you'll win on the weapon banner either way if you're trying for a weapon to equip on your Ocelot. I'm flabbergasted at how bad this unit is. Genuinely. She only released back in 4.5, which is a long time for us humans, but in gacha game time, that's really not that long. I understand that this unit was nothing more than filler, but even so, isn't this a bit extreme? She has lost all of her use cases within 4 patches. The moment that Kachina came out, it was over for her, but Xilonen is only sealing this deal further. Speaking of which, that Ocelot is everything that Chiori should have been. I have no clue what their intention was with this character. Yeah, she buffs Itto, but wouldn't a dedicated 5-star buffer for his own personal damage have been better? Regardless, she's certainly nothing to write home about, and I do not recommend her in the slightest. Emily is a great example of how a niche sub-DPS should be done, because at least she works with really strong units such as Arlecchino and Linny, while also being an excellent teammate for Kenichi. In any case, Chiori, I'm sorry, you were done diabolically dirty. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Chiori's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and you can actually ignore every single con that I said in this video because our dolls can make funny faces. Peak.